welcome back to the Unlock a Life You Love podcast. My name is Dr. Tim Teel. I am the Doc of Unlock, and this week we have a very special guest on our podcast. Her name is Theda Phoenix, and Theda is a very interesting human being. I'm not going to steal her thunder, but I'll let her tell her story. She is a sound healer, and you will have the opportunity to look her up and listen to some of the work that she does. But we're going to talk today about some of the sound healing that she does, and I want to get your story, Theda. Tell us who you are and what is it that you do.
Well, I always don't really know how to answer that when people ask, "Tell us who you are." Um, I guess I I I just really love to share my heart, you know? So there's like what we do and then there's who we are. And who I am is someone that is just here to love and to bring more light into the world and to help awaken and facilitate healing for others, awaken the inner healer in others. Yeah, I find that question challenging to answer because there's so many ideas about who a person is, you know? And then there's the
Let's
beingness that we are.
then let's start out with where do you live, and what do you define as sound healing?
hmm So I live in British Columbia, in Canada, and kind of in the Lower Mainland. And I've also spent time on Vancouver Island. I've had the the what do you call it? The privilege or the gift to be able to live near the ocean and on Vancouver Island for many years, near the ocean, and in this beautiful province close to nature.
Is as an ear, nose, and throat guy, uh, you know, sound and hearing loss and all the rest of that is a big part of our lives. When people can't hear well, when they can't communicate, there is a lot of internal emotional turmoil that comes along with that. So being able to hear sound and being able to process sound is central to healthy living and a healthy interaction with your environment. And in 2020, I was introduced to binaural beat technology, and it sounded a little weird to me, where you would introduce a pure tone of sound to one ear and a slightly different pure tone of sound to the opposite ear. And when you listen to both of those sounds, you hear both sounds, but you also hear the subtracted difference in the frequency between these two sounds. So if you played a 400 hertz tone here and a 408 hertz tone here, you heard both sounds, but you also heard an 8 hertz beat in between that. And if you took one ear off, you just hear the opposite sound. And if you take this ear off, you hear this one. But when you put them both on, you hear the subtracted difference between those two as a beat of that exact subtracted difference. I was like, they didn't teach me this stuff in medical school at all, or in residency or anywhere else. And no, and the reason that they wouldn't teach it to you is that they don't recognize that it has any use or any purpose. No, however, after I started listening to some of this stuff, I found it easier to process emotion. I found it easier to not be as upset about things. And about 3 months after I started doing this, my staff even noticed. They said, uh, are you okay? They said, they even asked me, are you like cheating on your wife or something? Because you're like a happy dude. And I said, no, no, no. No, we're okay. No, no, but we're just using sound as a way to help my brain function better, because apparently it makes the right and left sides of the brain talk to one another in a way that that they hadn't before, and that connection actually gets stronger than it was before, and we start using more of our brain. So sound is a big deal, and how we process it is a big deal, and it does have an effect on how we process emotion. I've listened to some of your stuff, and it is really interesting. You could, I don't know how people would describe it as a haunting sound, as a angelic sound. I'm sure it gets described in a myriad of ways. How would you describe your music?
Yeah, so I have a few thoughts. So what you're talking about with all of that, the mathematical elements, right? Music and mathematical, those are always been like two subjects that I was really good at growing up. Because they're so intrinsically connected, right? Because frequency, there's mathematical ratios. However, I consider myself as a sound healer, so I'm aware of some of a lot of that stuff, but it's for me, I consider myself an intuitive sound healer more so than mathematical, even though that has a wonderful function and use. So my specific type of sound healing is more intuitive and based on intention and feel. And it's very much connected to who is receiving the music when I'm creating it a lot of times. And my recordings are so I do have several albums that I've recorded, but then I do a lot of live events as well. And so what you hear on the studio albums, so I have two albums called Crystal Calm, Volume 2 of Crystal Calm, and then Volume 2. And those were recorded with binaural microphones. And so we have that. What that means is, so the microphones were being recorded by my producer in his ears, and then I would play the singing bowls, crystal singing bowls, and sing around him in three-dimensional space, so that when you listen back to it on headphones, you actually get the three-dimensional immersive experience. So it adds to the effect on the brain waves to really put people into that more relaxed brainwave state, the more meditative brainwave states. And so in those albums, they can be kind of haunting. That music, it can be kind of haunting, and it also depends on the tones and the frequencies of the bowls that we're playing, and then how they go together. So I often will play in a harmonic way with my crystal singing bowls and using my voice as an intuitive instrument to bring in this sacred, to bring in the sacred, the presence of the sacred. And people often have been saying to me in my live experiences that it's like they're hearing voices from all around the world, like from other cultures. So my voice brings in a lot of, I have a strong connection with earth-based spiritualities and shamanic kinds of traditions. And I always had a strong connection with the First Nations of the land. I got to grow up actually on a float house in northern Vancouver Island and go to a potlatch when I was 12 for one of the First Nation bands up in that area. And I always felt a really strong connection with nature and the intrinsic with the elements, the intrinsic spirituality that exists in all of nature and all of the world and the elements. And yeah, so for me, I often will refer to my sound healing music as a shamanic sound healing, because I'm bringing in different instruments like a drum and crystal bowls and rattles and shakers and chimes and a lot of different frequencies and tones and sounds and chanting in my voice. And also light language as well has been really opening up as well, and bringing that in to
So,
anchor this beautiful healing energies.
so talk to me about these singing bowls because, or these crystal bowls. I don't know a lot about them. I've heard them on multiple different occasions. Are there, is there a specific frequency that you're trying to hit? Is there, what's happening? And because I went and listened to some of your stuff on YouTube, and I'm like, that is so neat. So talk to me about the crystal bowls.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little story. Actually, my very first experience with crystal singing bowls was over 20 years ago. And it was just at the beginning of this spiritual awakening that I was having. And I went to a crystal singing bowl meditation, and the facilitator started to play the bowls. And she actually did something which was very neat. she started to play them just to give us a taste and see how we felt receiving the frequencies, because it is not always a pleasant experience for people when they are exposed to these singing bowl frequencies and tones. And it can be very uncomfortable sometimes. And sometimes people are very surprised because they come to a sound journey, sound bath. They think that it's going to be this beautiful, pleasurable, calming experience, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it stirs things up and it can cause things to rise. And so for me, she started to play them, and I instantly felt this tension, like an anxiety in my chest, right? Like right here. I just felt very anxious all of a sudden and uncomfortable. And then she stopped playing and she did a little check-in around the room and asked, like, is there anything coming up for anyone? And so I spoke up and I shared with her that I was feeling this energy, and she did a little like kind of energy work with me, and just acknowledged that there was like some broken heart energy, and then I just felt like it just dissolved, it just lifted up off of me. And then we went into the sound meditation with the bowls, and I was able to just relax and enjoy and receive it. And I'll never forget that experience, because there is like a calibration that can happen for people when they first are exposed to sound healing. And I did have a broken heart energy from childhood, some things that had happened in my childhood with my parents, and just like things don't always go the way you're like hoping they will in life, right? And we have grief that we don't always know how to process sometimes, or different feelings. And that's one of the amazing, amazing things about sound healing, is that it really often gives a space and an opportunity for that stuck energy, those old emotions and energy to just lift off. And it doesn't have to be a big mental process. It can just be maybe a few tears, maybe just the energy releasing. And yeah, it's really powerful and incredible how this works.
It is. And no, what I would point out to people who are listening to the podcast is that whenever you talk about energy healing, or any energy psychology, any energy healing technique, whether that is emotional freedom technique tapping, whether it is super conscious work, whether it is breath work, whether it is guided meditations,
Reiki.
whether it is Reiki, or if it is sound healing. There is, I even consider massage a
Yeah.
form of energy healing, and no, we can go down a rabbit hole on that deal. But no, but my point is that any of these tools that people can use to either process, create some space, or completely reprogram any of these emotional disturbances, unpleasant emotional experiences, grief,
Yeah.
trauma, any of the rest of this stuff. When you start working with energy, which is in or these techniques that we refer to as energy techniques, what I believe we're really doing is working directly with the emotion and emotional energy that is us. Okay, that is our spirit simply moving around and experiencing the world. And I remain absolutely convinced that the whole purpose in our being here is to simply experience as many different emotional situations as we possibly can, and learn to manipulate it, learn that it is stored in our body, it is that we're producing all kinds of dysfunction earlier in our lives than we had ever imagined possible,
Oh,
that
yeah.
we don't have conscious access to it, but we do have emotional access to it. And when we start manipulating that stuff, okay, whether it's massage, or it's Reiki, or it's music, or it's EFT, or it's not any of these things, there's a pattern of behavior that goes along with all of these techniques. And initially it can be exactly what you talked about. It can be a little uncomfortable because we stirred something up. This is my journey
Yeah.
into energy work. I was in 2020. I was introduced to emotional freedom technique tapping. I felt something change.
Yeah.
It can't be weighed. It can't be measured. It must
Very
be, as
powerful.
you said, it must be felt. Okay, and in Western medicine, we don't like things we can't weigh and we can't measure. So we're like, yeah, that's weird. That's woo woo. That's all Eastern and that's weird. And not, and no, it may be weird, but it's also something that we feel. Okay. And when I felt the power in EFT and and started learning some things about it, I started tapping on early childhood separation from my mother. My mom got sick when I was or 6 months old, something like that. I got shipped off to my grandparents. I stayed there for like 6 or 8 months. Family was reunited. It's not like it's a family secret or anything, but no, but we just go on and live your life. Well, that event left an emotional mark on me as a baby, and I had
Sure.
no idea it was there. Okay,
So
none.
it's yeah, exactly. It's pre-thought, and if you think about it, we have so many like our conscious mind is only registers a small amount, but everything we've ever experienced is stored in our body, and it's there. There's a record of it, and
Exactly.
if we haven't been able to release and process emotions, they get stuck. I actually was listening to a book called The Emotion Code recently. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that is also check that out because
You'll
it basically is to identify through muscle testing and to release the emotion so simply actually without even necessarily having to process it. I was fascinated by this book and it
yeah.
also
You'll
yeah,
be fascinated by my next book, which is called The DNA Passport,
awesome.
because I am absolutely convinced that our long-term memory is actually stored in DNA.
Yeah,
DNA is,
yeah,
97% of DNA is not junk. That's a stupid, moronic idea that lacks
exactly.
any creativity at all. And no, once you understand that that if we're storing long-term memory in DNA, that means that we're manipulating our own DNA, and we don't commit anything to long-term memory unless there is emotion attached to the information. Okay, emotion is the key, and emotion is what we're using. That's the energy that we're using to store that information long term. It's the same energy
Right.
that we can turn that memory off. We can draw some of the energy away from the information that has energy attached to it, and just as easily as it was attached, we can detach it.
Yeah,
And
totally.
what you're doing, I believe, what you're doing is simply using a different tool to do the same job that many other things are attempting to do, and that is simply take the energy away from some of that stored information.
Yeah, and so for me the other thing in terms of what I'm doing, um so there's that, and then there's also a connecting piece that happens with me where it's like connecting with the heart, reminding people um, of their own like inner guidance, their own connection with their own higher self, their soul's purpose. So I believe that we all came here with with the seeds of like the DNA, these encoded that like the seed holds all of the program of what is possible for us to grow into and become. And and so like my own life journey was like, okay, coming here, and then it's like a remembrance. It's like, okay, what we kind of have to solve this puzzle as we go on this journey of like, oh yeah, what did I come here for again? What did I come here to do? And I've had a couple of really powerful experiences in my life, like you were sharing with me earlier about something that happened when you were 8 years old, and I had an experience when I was 9 years old of this light coming into my crown and this really powerful feeling of like I came here for a reason. Like I don't know what it is, but I came to the planet. I see the earth and it was like the veil opened up and this
Can you tell
very
me the whole story? I want to hear the
well,
whole
I
story.
was just sitting, I was standing in my living room, and I think my dad was sitting on the couch, and all of a sudden, it literally, I don't even know what catalyzed it. It was, but I was always a very deep thinker as a child, like really inquiring to like the nature of what is this experience? What is this existence? And I remember having really profound moment of like self-realization of like, I'm me, like I'm here, I'm me, I'm in this body, right? And like being fascinated by that. And yeah, and I had this experience at 9 years old. I'm just standing there, and it was like this light and opened up between the veil. So as I imagine this veil this veil between our spirit realm of where we came, the source space, and this reality. And it was like this light opened up, like that opened up, and this light came through into the top of my head, and just this feeling of absolute certainty, the most profound certainty that I have felt in my life, and of knowing, like this intrinsic, innate knowing, like I came here for a reason, like, and I didn't know what it was, and then, carrying on living my life, and just going through what I'm drawn to. I always had this love of music, and I had a really beautiful experience, also, where I was deeply touched emotionally by music, when I was about 9 or 10 years old, in an assembly. Someone in my school was playing a piece of piano music, and I was blown away. There was some, like, a recognition. It was like I felt so moved, and what came to me was that this kind of beauty exists in me somehow. I don't know how, but this kind of beauty exists, like the ability to create this kind of beauty that really touches emotionally, like that, the heart.
And
So
that
I lived
moves
my,
us.
yeah, it moves us,
It moves
exactly.
us, right?
So I'm living my life, and then and also I was born to very metaphysical parents that were very connected to nature, and kind of hippie parents, but but they weren't so granola as I was growing up. But um, so then I was living close to nature, like I said. My mother moved into this beautiful wilderness when I was young, a place called Echo Bay in the northern Vancouver Island area. And we lived on a float house with no electricity. And I actually was commercial fishing with my stepfather, deckhanding on his boat, prawns, when I was a teenager. And then one day I ended up forgetting my lunch and just water fasting the whole day. And I was reading this book called Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom by Christiane Northrup. And she was talking about, she was working with Carolyn Meese, Dr. Carolyn Meese, who is a medical intuitive. And there were so many stories about how women had healed physical problems in their body, physical ailments, through addressing a non-physical aspect of their life, right? Some emotional thing, some relationship that wasn't working, something that was out of alignment, and then their body healed, right? And I ended up reading this book all day, and suddenly, I stood outside, and I'm looking at the ocean and the trees, the islands in the distance, and all of a sudden, I had the same experience with this light opening up again when I was about 20, 21 years old. And it was like this light came into my crown, and this like through my central channel, right through the top of my head, all the way down. And again, it was this feeling of certainty. And I knew why I was here. And what came to me was, I'm here to facilitate healing. And it was this absolute knowing. And so I was like, well, I don't know in exactly what capacity, but I'm here to facilitate healing. So then I started doing massage. I studied neurolinguistic programming and hypnotherapy in school full time. I did solution focused counseling and coaching, and Reiki and Pleiadian light work. And I studied all of these different kinds of spiritual healing modalities for a few years. Got a job in a health food store. And then after about 5, 6 years of that, through some personal development work that I was doing, I opened up this vocal channel. And during this time, I was singing, but I was very shy and I was very self-conscious. And so I always had this dream of being a singer, but I had to know the words, and only have the words when I was singing in front of people. And I would be like shaking in fear. My palms would be all sweaty and heart pounding, and I would be so scared. But then through this personal development work that I did, actually had an experience, which was basically just eye gazing in a group, when I suddenly realized that actually I was looking at a friend of mine across the room, and I was thinking, she's not feeling her feelings. And I had tears running down my face. And I kept saying, she's not feeling her feelings. And suddenly I hear a voice, Theda, let go. And it was like this shock. He's talking to me. oh my God, I'm holding on. I'm the one that's like not feeling her
Not feeling
feelings.
the feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just broke down and I just let myself cry. And that was like this huge opening and this huge freedom opened up after that. Because my relationship with the fear before I was so dissociated from fear. I think because, my parents split up when I was young and I didn't have any way to process it. And so I just kind of cut off this part of myself emotionally. And so it was like this huge integration, realization. It was like, oh, I have all this fear that I didn't even know was stopping me from just being myself in my life and it fully, like in this, especially in this particular area that was so important to me, which was singing and my voice. And it was after that that this creative, spontaneous self-expression, I stood in front of a class and instead of speaking, I just shared one word at a time, came out my mouth, had no idea what I was gonna sing, but it was like one word at a time, coming in the moment. I'm singing, and it's all coming from my heart, like exactly whatever is just in my heart at that moment. And I felt like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff with my arms open and the wind blowing back my hair. And it was like this incredible sense of freedom to just let this flow spontaneously in the moment, right? Rather than having to have it all figured out and pre-planned before, to be safe, and which I think is very common for a lot of us in the world. And yeah, and then people were came up to me and they were deeply moved by my voice. Something really opened up for them. They got like, their hair stood up on their arms, and they were moved to tears, and yeah,
But
and I
but
realized,
how do you weigh and measure that, Theta? How do you
yeah,
weigh and
right?
measure that? We can't? Okay. The
No,
bottom
it's
line is we simply can't.
And it literally is just through feedback and
Right.
through connection and through the impact that people say that they've had. And that's the kind of sound healing that I do is a relational type of sound healing because it is dependent on the relationship. It's not just me over here doing sound to someone or doing healing through music to someone. It's really that, are they allowing themselves to be opened? Are they allowing themselves to be touched, to be felt, to feel, to go to those places? And so my intention is to create a space of safety where people can go to those places where they can feel safe and held and supported by the divine, by their own, inner guidance, by spiritual presence, and by that I believe that we're fundamentally supported, right? And the universe supports whatever our intention is, and things come through to us when we're aligning, when we're open and asking, and in that kind of partnership with the universe and with life. So
Very, very well said, young lady. That is very well said. Listen,
yeah.
I told everybody that we try and keep these podcast sessions relatively short, but no, but we're gonna no, so we're gonna wind up this session. We will come back next week and have Theta Phoenix back here because what I want to do is talk to you more in depth about what you do and how people can get hooked up with you. But Theta Phoenix is our guest today. She is you can find her at thedaphoenix.com. You can find her on YouTube. Her music is just incredible. Livingsoundtemple.com is another place to find Theta, and it will change your life. It's another fantastic tool that you can use to reach inside and touch your heart and open things up and experience the full experience of being fully human
Yeah.
and open yourself up to the infinite. And sound healing is just one way that we can do that. Lita, no, thank you so much for being here this week. We'll see you back next week. My name is Dr. Tim Teel. I am the Doc of Unlock. This is the Unlock a Life You Love podcast. We'll see you guys next week.